Growing up, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. So I enrolled in law school and everything. But in the middle of being trained to be an attorney, I ended up sensing a call to ministry. And that was a little bit bizarre because I never thought of myself as a pastor or even very pastoral. By the grace of God, and I would say in spite of me, I ended up in this tiny little church north of Toronto. And I started working there, and by the grace of God, it started to grow. Within a decade, we became the fastest growing church in our denomination in the country, and it was a crazy, crazy ride. If you talked to me back then, I would have said I was on top of the world. About a decade into my time in ministry, I got invited by Andy Stanley to speak at a huge conference at North Point Community Church in Atlanta. In church world, that's sort of like being tapped on the shoulder to be the starting quarterback for the Super Bowl. In fact, I couldn't believe it. And there were 2,500 leaders from around the world there when I gave my talk. By all accounts, it was a home run. And I thought to myself, like I actually remember this, I thought, I don't know whether it gets any better than this. Right after that conference, I flew home from Atlanta. And when we landed in Toronto, though, it's like I fell off a cliff. I don't know what happened, but I got so tired. I lost all my energy. I lost all my passion for my job, for my life, and for everything. Now, for about a decade, a few years anyway, people have been telling me, Carey, if you don't slow down, you're going to burn out. You know what I did? I ignored them. I thought burnout was for weaklings, for wimpy people. Burnout was for people who wanted sleep and needed it, and I didn't need sleep. And this is what I thought. In my arrogance and my stupidity, the rules don't apply to me. And the rules never apply to you until they do. So I thought if I took some time off, feeling like I did, maybe it would help. So I took 3 weeks off in the summer. But by the end of those 3 weeks, I actually felt worse than when I started. Then I talked to our leadership team coming back because I realized this is out of my control. And I said to our board, look, I need to let you in on what's going on. I have tried to fix this. It's been going on for a while. It's not working. And I don't know what's happening, but I'm broken. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know when I'm going to get better. And they were incredibly compassionate and kind. And they said to me, Carey, what do you need? You need an extended time away, a sabbatical? And that was a really gracious offer. But I figured if I took an extended time away, I might never come back. I felt like I was finished, but I didn't feel like God was finished with me. So I got back to work. And it was slow. I was able to preach, mostly because you have a lot of muscle memory after 15 years of preaching. But it was really hard to write. I had brain fog like you wouldn't believe. And I was still exhausted. I was limping every day. And some days I had trouble getting out of bed. But I got up every Sunday and I delivered the message. The interesting thing was, and this was the part that was really confusing to me, is the people who I had told about what was going on inside would listen to me. And they would say after I taught, man, you're back, like way to go. And in the inside, I'm like, I'm glad it seems that way on the outside, but it sure doesn't feel like that in here. I still felt dead. It took a good 5 months or so before I felt the first flicker of passion come back. And then it took 3 to 5 years for me to actually recover. And it's funny because when you're burned out, and if you've ever burned out, you know this, all you want to do is get back to normal. And by the grace of God, I had the common sense to figure out, wait a minute. Normal destroyed me, okay? Normal ruined me. And if I go back to normal, it's probably just going to be a matter of months or years until I burn out again. So I became very determined that I was never going to go back to normal, like the old normal. Part of my problem was I never decided how much work was enough. I never set in my mind what my limits were going to be. As we got more people, I just worked more hours, and I didn't declare a finish line, so my body declared one for me. It forced me to take rest. I wasn't choosing it for myself, so my body just said, that's it, I'm on strike. So a question I've got to regularly ask myself, And it's a fair question I think we all need to ask ourselves, and I want you to go and ask yourself this question now. How are you, really? And no knee-jerk answers or church answers like, oh, things are great, I almost kicked the dog 10 minutes ago, but things are awesome today. I mean, how are you really? Some of you, I'm going to suggest, probably at least maybe half of you, would say, honestly, not so good. Maybe you can relate to the burnout I experienced, particularly if you're younger. Do you know that 70% of young adults in their 20s and 30s, say they're currently experiencing some level of burnout? But this is something that can happen to any of us, no matter our age, no matter whether you're a lawyer or a pastor or a teacher or a stay-at-home parent, an accountant, a student. Wherever you find yourself, burnout hits just about everybody. There's a study Deloitte, the accounting firm, did a couple of years ago. And here's what they discovered about their executives. 82% of senior executives regularly finish work feeling emotionally tired and physically exhausted. And what would you think happened when those men or women arrive home at the end of the day? You know what happens? They've exerted so much of themselves at work that they show up at home completely exhausted, nothing left to give, day after day. And that's exactly what I had done. I gave it all to my work, and honestly, I cheated my family. My wife got my leftovers, my kids got my leftovers, and on my good days, they got a little bit extra, and I was maybe able to make it to a kid's game. Now, of course, I didn't want to be a deadbeat dad. I didn't want to sacrifice my family for the sake of work, but I was exhausted. And I also realized when you do leadership wrong, when you live in an unsustainable way, it is exhausting, and it will cost you. It could cost you everything and everyone you value. And that's why I've spent the last 15 plus years of my life trying to figure out what happened to me and teaching people about how to avoid just that. So let's get practical. What are some signs you're burning out? How can you tell when you're heading in the wrong direction? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share 11 things with you, and I want you to keep score, okay? You can use your fingers and maybe one toe if you need to. So out of 11, how many signs do you show that you might be burning out? See how many might be true of you. So sign number 1. You have no passion. Think about something that you were once passionate about. It could be family, your career, or whatever. And now you just can't feel it anymore. The passion's gone. That's the first sign. Sign number 2, and this is a big danger sign, you no longer feel the highs or the lows. Somebody says, oh, did you know that so-and-so just got diagnosed with cancer? And you've got a good game face, and you can say, oh, that's too bad. But inside, you don't feel a thing. Someone says, hey, did you know those two just got engaged? And you're supposed to be happy, but inside, nothing. Here's another sign. Your emotional reactions when you have them are not appropriate. So little things make you disproportionately emotional or angry. For example, maybe your 8-year-old doesn't empty the dishwasher and you end up having a nuclear meltdown. Or conversely, nothing's a big deal. You've just gone numb. You're like, yep, I'm probably about to get fired. Yep, might lose the house financially. Yep, my kids just don't talk to me anymore. But you don't feel anything inside. How about number 4? Everybody drains you. So total transparency, some people drain you, okay? That's normal, that's life. But when everybody drains you, the love of your life, your kids, your best friend, your friends at work, when everybody's exhausting, that's a sign. Number 5, are you keeping score, by the way? Okay, 5th sign, you're becoming cynical. So I was, and again, I am an optimist. When I started my career, I would say I was 95% optimist and 5% cynic. But a decade later, when I burned out, I was 95% cynic and 5% optimist. Sign number 6, nothing satisfies you. Plenty of money, good food, sex, a vacation, and you're just like, nope, not satisfying. Number 7, you can't think straight. Brain fog perpetually is something that burned out people struggle with. You don't have any new ideas. You can't seem to clarify your thoughts. That's a challenge. Sign number 8, your productivity is dropping. I remember when I was burning out trying to write an email and pulling in our associate pastor at the time, and I said, hey, I've spent an hour on this. Now, there's literally 3 lines in the email, but I had to ask him, is this even English? Like, my productivity was tanking and I had massive brain fog. Sign number 9, you're self-medicating. Now, that could mean a number of things. Maybe you're taking prescriptions not exactly as directed, or your weekend drinking has become daily drinking, or you're doing stuff just to block out the stress instead of dealing with it appropriately. Sign number 10, you don't laugh anymore. You've just lost the joy of life. And finally, number 11, sleep and time off no longer refuel you. They should. It should be cause and effect, but they no longer do. You're just tired constantly. Okay, so that's all 11. The question is, how many do you have? First of all, if you've only got 2 or 3, welcome to life. I don't know that it gets a whole lot better on this side of heaven, but I imagine there's a few of you watching this who are probably at a 10 or 11. And if that's the case, you're like I was in that season. You're probably very close to complete burnout. And I hope not a lot of you are at that point. But I think a lot of people, maybe the majority of people, are somewhere in the middle, like maybe a 5 or a 6. And I'm not a medical doctor, but I have a term for this. If you're a 5 or a 6 or even a 4, I call this low-grade burnout. And my definition of low-grade burnout is simple. It's where the joy of life is gone, but the functions of life continue. You get up every day, you go to work, you go to your family functions, you hang out with your friends, you do church, you watch sports, you watch your shows, you read your books, but the joy is gone. See, that's a form of burnout. And the question I want to look at with our remaining time is, how do you tackle it? What do you do about it? How do you fix something that a vacation won't fix? Don't get me wrong, like I'm a huge fan of vacations and I take them every year, but here's the problem. Time off won't heal you when the problem is how you spend your time on. For most of us, we know how to vacation well. We can do that tropical thing or go up to the mountains, but we don't know how to vocation well. See, what you want to do is avoid that stress spiral that everybody struggles with when you end up being overworked, overwhelmed, and overcommitted. So here are a couple things to really help you avoid burnout. The first thing, don't do everything yourself. Start telling yourself and believing that everything doesn't depend on you. See, I had that problem. For a decade, I thought it all depended on me. So whether you run a company, whether you're in ministry, whether you're a stay-at-home parent, sometimes you behave like everything depends on you. Everything depends on me. We all say, right? Oh yeah, everything doesn't depend on me, but we don't believe it. And I've learned over the last decade and a half, everything does not depend on me. Or, to put it another way, when it comes to people of faith, God doesn't actually need me in order to get things done. So there's a story in the book of Exodus involving the greatest leader of that era, Moses. He was leading the nation of Israel in its early phases, and he was getting overwhelmed. There were over 500,000 Israelites. As a leader, every day he sat and listened to the people's disputes so that the nation would stay at peace. People would basically wait their turn, stand in line, literally from morning till evening, and Moses would hear their disputes. He was putting in a lot of hours, and some of you can relate to that. He was working all the time. Anyway, to catch up in the story, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, notices that Moses is just doing way too much all by himself. And then he interjects. He tells him, and he says, Moses, what are you doing? Like, you need help. And he tells him what's going to happen if he doesn't slow down. And this is what he says. He says, you and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. In other words, Moses, you're heading for burnout. And this is even so significant. You know what else he says? You know who else is going to suffer? It's not just you, Moses. It's all these people, these very people you're trying to help. You're not helping them. Jethro was telling him, Moses, you think everything depends on you? But it doesn't. And honestly, I can relate to that as a leader. When I was going through burnout, I felt like it all depended on me. And on my bad days, I still do. But God comes along and says, no, actually, it doesn't. Haven't I given gifts to all kinds of people? It actually doesn't all ride on you. And that's what Jethro told Moses. He says, it doesn't all have to depend on you. Get some help. And as far as all these disputes you're listening to, get other people to handle most of these disputes, and then you just focus on the big ones. You basically are the court of appeal. Look at what he said, and this is huge. He said this, quote, If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. In other words, there will be some strain. It's not all going to disappear. But if you're smarter about how you work, you'll be able to handle that amount of pressure, and maybe more importantly, the people you're trying to help will get even better service. Now, I know some of you started a business, and it's hard. You're a sole proprietor. Some of you are trying to keep your home life together. It's hard. Some of you are single parents, and I know the responsibilities you carry are huge. But you got to ask yourself, does it really all depend on you? It doesn't. There's probably someone around who can help you carry the load. And I had to learn to step back and give some things to other people. When I was a young leader, I thought I was great at everything. When the church was really small, I actually used to do our graphic design. And then I met an actual graphic designer with real skills, and she was so much better. Another one, managing people for me can be a struggle. I'm not great at it. I always like to say I manage self-managed people really well. But then I started hiring great managers, and amazing things started to happen, and I could focus on how God gifted me. As we wrap up, I want to give you one final strategy to help keep burnout from happening, and it's this. Do your most important work when you're at your best. So think about it this way. Everyone gets 24 equal hours in a day, but not all hours are equal when it comes to your production level or your energy level. Some people call what I'm describing an energy clock. So think about it this way. You've got times of day, a few hours, for me it's in the morning, that would typically be your best hours. You're energetic, you're bright, you're excited. Call that or think of that as your green zone, when you're at your best. You're alert, you're ready to go. Then you probably also have a yellow zone where you can still power through stuff and do good work, but you've also got a couple hours in the day. For a lot of people, that's like right after lunch or just before dinner, 4 to 6 p.m., that you might call your red zone, where you're just kind of going through the motions. You need a nap or a Starbucks or something. So for me, as I said, my green zone, it's in the morning. I do my most important things, the things that I'm uniquely gifted in, such as writing, preparing for talks like this. I do a podcast. I do all the prep in the morning. Do that all in the green zone. Then I have other tasks that I have to do, but they're not as important, like answering emails or DMs. And it's not my job, my primary job, and they don't require as many brain cells. I can save that for my yellow or my red zone. And on my days off, this applies too. I used to spend the morning, because I'm a little OCD, like mowing my lawn, getting perfect lawn lines, get everything organized. And one day, my wife said to me, "Why don't you spend more of your green zone when you're off with me?" And I'm like, that is a good point. So now on Saturday mornings, we hang out. We have a really relaxing morning together, and the lawn can get mowed in the afternoon or the early evening. Or, I do the things that I need to do after lunch. That can always wait for my yellow or red zone. So when you think about your most important relationships, think about your green zone as well. The point is, what are your most important things? What are you best at? And then simply do this. Do what you're best at when you're at your best, and let the other stuff sort itself out. You can start on this as early as tomorrow. Might take a little bit of time for you to narrow down exactly when your green, yellow, and red zone is. And then you want to line up your schedule with those tasks so that you do them in the right area. Again, as much as possible. But it's a huge help to put things, even alone time, the time you want to spend with God, with family time, on the calendar. Now here's a fun secret. This also frees up a lot of time. When you have appointments in your calendar, even something that says family time on a Saturday, when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, what are you doing on Saturday?" You know what my old answer was? Nothing. And then I get trapped into doing something I didn't want to do and have to disappoint my family. Now I just pull out my calendar, I look at Saturday, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I've got a commitment. Now, that commitment might say family time, but they don't know that. And most people respect that, and they say, oh, okay, no problem. And if you really want to meet them, you can do it another time, maybe in your yellow or red zone another day. So you see how that works? That really frees time up. I've been following what I've just shared with you for over 15 years. And I'll tell you, I have stayed out of burnout. Sure, I get tired for a day or two at a time, but nothing approaching burnout. And my optimism is back, and my joy is back, and my passion is back. And most days, my emotions work exactly the way God designed them to. So to avoid burnout, reclaim margin. There's no way around it. So this week, I want you to think about using your green zone to create margin for what God wants to do in you, through you, and even without you. And to those of you who feel crushed by the weight of your jobs, I pray God will give you wisdom to clearly see how to reorganize things so that you have margin for what matters most. For those of you who are single parents and carry a heavier load on your own, I pray that you would now know what you need to say no to so that you can say yes to what really matters most, including caring for yourself. And to those of you who feel like everything rises and falls on you, I pray you will see that it doesn't, and that you would choose to live in a way today that helps you thrive tomorrow.